Welcome to Automation Caffeine, your dose of invigorating business automation tips packed as interesting anecdotes and questions. We have a different guest every episode from various industries, countries, and backgrounds for a half-hour chat over coffee. My name is Jesse. I'm the co-founder of Trigger. I'm a serial entrepreneur, but above all, I'm a coffee snob. And today I am joined by Ariza Sentís, who is Innovation Project Manager at Seresco and has a PhD in precision agriculture, for which she researched innovative ways to improve precision agriculture using drones, and also is a self-employed agricultural engineer. Hi, Mark.
Hi.
Hey. So like always, we do a 3-word intro. So in 3 words, who is Mark?
I would say that I'm curious, I'm eager to learn, and I'm a farmer.
You are a farmer. Yeah,
Exactly.
that is really cool. So this is also obviously you studied precision agriculture, as you said, but I think that a lot of people don't really know what this is, and you have a PhD in this, so I'm guessing you're pretty good at explaining stuff. Can you explain what precision agriculture is exactly?
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna try my best. So basically, when we are having a field, there's some variability within the field.
Mhm.
So what happens in the north of the field is very different from what happens to the south or the east. So what we try to do with precision agriculture is mostly applying the exact input that the field needs. So if it needs like 100 will be applied. If it needs 0 is going to be applied. So when we are doing this, we are trying to manage like very precisely, very accurately. So then we can have the biggest yield, and then we
Mhm.
can of course have the highest revenue as farmers. So it's mostly
Yeah.
about optimization.
Yeah, and I can also imagine that this is also important from, well, it can be cost optimization, obviously, yield improvement, but I can also see that it's maybe it's not biological farming or necessarily, but applying the sort of what the field needs also prevents, I think, like maybe pollution in a way of the soil. Is that correct, or did I misunderstood that?
It's totally correct. It's mostly about reducing waste. So only what is needed is going to be applied. So we are not throwing like some fertilizer or some chemicals. It's only the one that are needed is applied. So that's the main goal. And of course, when we are dealing with all these variables, what we try to do is being as eco-friendly as possible. So we
Mhm.
are having a higher revenue while being more eco-friendly and having a more sustainable product.
Yeah, so that's exactly like that. Those are all pluses, obviously. How big is like the sizes? Because you mentioned when we were prepping this, you mentioned that the fields that you're talking about are a little bit bigger than what I'm used to with fields. So, what is like the sizes of the patches that you would be looking at when it comes to the precision that you're talking about? How small are those patches?
It can go from very small to very large fields. So it really doesn't depend. So there's variability in every single acre of land.
Oh
So we
wow!
can be dealing with bigger fields in which maybe we are going to do to use an airplane or even a satellite, or with very small ones that only with a drone or with a ground robot can be sufficient to monitor everything that is happening. So depending on the size, we can use very different technologies.
Oh wow, that is really cool. Yeah, I hadn't thought about the size impacting the tech that you use, but it's pretty logical that you would do that.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. So in the States, we are dealing with very, very large fields. Of course, the drone would be running out of battery in 10 minutes or 15.
yeah,
So that's mostly for the Netherlands or for countries that have like very small fields. For when we are talking about America, that's another division.
yeah, yeah. Interesting fun facts for people is that the Netherlands is the by absolute numbers, from what I understood, the number 2 exporter of agricultural produce, next to indeed the United States, as you said, which is a well-known, very large one. But I understand that the fields there indeed are far bigger, and you need different things. But you're one of the, let's say, the newer generation, obviously, of agriculturists. What are some of the trends in automating agriculture that you see? Like which tools and devices? You already named drones, satellites. Like these are all things that, well, when I learned what farming was, were never mentioned.
Yeah, so I mean, what I have to say is there's like a new revolution in all the farming industry. Of course, when we are talking with farmers who are like 70, 80 years old, because they're, of course, the OGs of farmers, they
Those are the ones that I know, yeah.
yeah, exactly. So they are using like the very old tractors that don't even have a cabin. So that's very, very different. But when we are talking about the new generation, of course, all my farmer friends have GPS in the tractor. So that's the most important one. When you are dealing with a large field, the thing that you need to do is like knowing what you have already done, if it's plowing or sowing or whatever, and what needs to be done. And also like with very straight lines. So like for sure, the GPS is like the best friend when you are having a new generation tractor. And then of course, it really depends on how much you want to I don't know how to say, but like how much you want to do. So like how willing you are to improve your actual farm. So it can range from very different technologies. Some people that I know are already using drones to have like a general monitoring of the field. Me, for example, I do it in my own fields. I have the drone and I fly over it. I get to know like the current status, if it's like very vigorous, if it's not, if there's like a pest or whatever is happening in the field. I get to know the exact status with a drone. Of course, I have to say that my fields are larger than in the Netherlands, but not as large as in the States. So
Yeah.
I can just change the batteries, recharge them, and what I cannot do in one morning, I do it in the afternoon or the day after. And yeah, that's something that the new generations are really willing to uptake, and it's already happening. So that's a big plus. Of course, it's cheaper than some of the technologies. If we want to go with ground robots, we are dealing with much, much more money. So yeah, it just depends on the final purpose and how willing you are.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and also you mentioned, and this was something that I cannot believe that I didn't think about this myself, but you mentioned before is like, yeah, tractors they run on diesel, and you use a drone or something, and it's electric. So it's also very very good in that sense. Like it's less of a problem. But even and I never thought about this part is the tractor obviously also it has a literal a footprint on the field if you drive it on the field and drones and stuff they don't, so that is also a very big advantage, I guess, right?
Exactly. I mean, in countries when there's like a big rainfall, for example, in the Netherlands, that it can probably it's flooding most of the well, not most of the time, but it's much more common than in some regions in Spain. It's very interesting because you can apply the chemical, for example, just after the rain. So it's probably not the case if it has rained a lot. Also, you can enter in the field even if it has rained a lot because you can just apply from the air. Or, for example, when the crop is much higher or much more developed,
Yeah.
you can, of course, enter with the tractor, but you are going to damage some plants, like the ones that are touching the wheel. But with the drones, this really doesn't happen. And, for example, with maize, we can see that there's like very large damage when you enter with the tractor, when it's like above half-meter height. So that's one of the most important advantages of drones. Of course, the price is much more different than a tractor, but what you can do with a tractor is much more than with a drone.
Yeah, of course, because a drone can't plow, I guess, yet.
Exactly.
But there's something that just dawned on me. We have this discussion, and I know that you're also the vice president of the Farmers Association in Catalonia, if I say it correctly.
Yeah.
And this is a thing. So here in the Netherlands, we have this discussion with the level of the groundwater. So for farmers, the groundwater needs to be low because then the land is dry, so that they can drive their tractors on it. But then for nature preservation, the groundwater needs to be higher for birds and wildlife to be there. So do you think that can also have an impact on these types of things where you use different technologies and that you could actually maybe work with a slightly higher level of groundwater? Because I assume it's not for every day, but like you said, when it rains, that's when it's trouble for the tractors. Do you see that having an impact?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it's gonna be much easier with the drones because, of course, the level of the groundwater is not affecting at all. This is like something quite important, but it has to say that you cannot do all the tasks that agriculture requires with a drone, of course. So for sure, you will need a tractor at any moment, like any moment. For example, for sowing or for plowing, if needed.
Yeah.
So for sure, maybe you can focus on which are the activities that need to be performed with a drone the moment that there's like the heaviest rains, and then so like
Exactly.
the groundwater is higher. So you can more or less combine all the tools that you have available. Or for example, use a ground robot instead of a tractor that weighs much less and is less affected. And also it compacts much less the soil. So it's all about like all the possibilities that are happening. But for sure, with drones, it's not so much affected with these atmospheric conditions, but of course it's really affected by rain. So when there's rain or like heavy wind, you cannot fly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there are always these days. Luckily, there's not that many of those a year, so that is at least something. It's yeah, that's really cool. So that is what you do in precision agriculture, and like we always go with a random and easy question before we go into the next part. So I have our nice wheel of unfortunate. And before we go into that, for everyone that's watching, if you have a question to Mar, feel free to ask it in the comments, and we'll pick it up at the end in the section that we have with Q&A. So feel free to ask anything related to agriculture, drones, and especially the combination of those two. But for now, let's see what our Wheel of Unfortune has in store for Mark. Tell us a painful truth about your industry. Yes, Mar.
Wow. Difficult question, but a painful truth. I would say that when we are dealing with research applied to agriculture, sometimes we are a bit too distant with farmers. And then farmers are a bit too distant with research. So this is something that I think that should be corrected. And for example, when I was doing my PhD, I found that there were very interesting research that was carried out, but they were mostly done in experimental fields. So of course, the conditions that happen in experimental fields are not the same as when we are dealing with a real firm, like owned by a farmer who doesn't do any research at all.
Yeah, so it's more controlled in the research fields, like the ones that they use, right?
Well,
yeah.
Not that you know what's going to happen, but you can a bit trick what is going to happen. So this is something that is really important, and I really encourage research to investigate in real conditions. Because, for example, I was dealing with object detection, which is basically detecting whatever I want in an image. Let's say that I wanted to detect a grape bunch. So it's not the same working with red varieties than with green varieties. So the green varieties are very similar with the green canopy, and then it's much more difficult. Or for example, we're dealing with an orange. It's circular and it's orange, of course. But the moment that it's not ripe enough, it's green. But why is research not working with that? Because if we want to do, for example, a yield prediction, you want to know like 1 or 2 months before harvest. And then it's when it's still green. So these are all the things that I think that it would be a painful reality. That is that we have to do research in real conditions, and farmers, we need to allow them to research in our fields.
Yeah. Is that a thing, that there's an unwillingness or maybe sort of a skepticism towards research amongst farmers?
Just that they don't know what is going to happen or what is going to be researched, and they might be afraid that something is going to affect the production. So which can happen, of course. I mean, if you do some activities that need to like a control treatment, let's say like an experiment, of course you need to do different levels of testing, and one is going to be better than another. But maybe the outputs that you are going to have will be better for future campaigns. Or maybe research can compensate the cost of the loss of production. So that's something to deal with what's happening.
Yeah, that is interesting too. But on the other hand, you can also find out new things that will actually improve your yield or improve sort of how you handle things like productivity and things. So there's also a lot of positive upsides that.
And it's going to happen in your own field, not in the one of the neighbors. So
exactly.
for sure the results are real for you.
Yeah, that is a very big advantage. Yeah, if you use your field, it's applied to you. That is a good point. Yeah. And when we're talking about like drones and things like, you already mentioned that it can get quite expensive if you use ground drones, because like with the wheels and stuff, that's pretty expensive, I presume. But is it expensive to start with drones and like AI? These things sound very expensive, I think, to many farmers. And on top of that, giving the challenges already in the markets where it's not there's not a lot of margin on agricultural produce. Would it be expensive to start, or are there easy ways to start?
For sure, there are easy ways to start. It just depends on how posh you want to get. So, for example, you can go to any technological shop and there are drones for around 500 euros. Of
Wow.
course, they are not going to be the best ones. Of course, they have limitations and they are not the same as the 20K ones. But to start, I would totally recommend to buy like the cheapest option that there's available, just to check how it works. Of course, you need a license, so that's very important. You have to take the license,
Yeah.
which is not well. Some countries have it for free. Some you have to pay like the taxes, so it's really not expensive. So do get the license because it's
Yeah.
by law. But then after that, you can just fly on your own fields and try to see what's happening. Get used to flying. Of course, it's like playing PlayStation, like it's with the joystick and everything, so it's quite easy. But you need to get used to it and also to know which type of images or videos you can get. Then
Mhm.
when you know all that, you can decide how much you want to invest. The next level would be like 2,000 euros. That can be like a better drone. You can even jump to 10,000, 20,000. Like the thing can go like very, very expensive. And what is the most important is not the drone, but the sensor, so the camera.
Yeah.
That's the most important one. When you buy the 500 euro one, it already has like the camera incorporated, so you cannot tweak it. Like that's the one that it's provided. But when you go a bit higher, like the drone comes without a camera, and then you can
Mm.
just include the one that you prefer. If you want one that takes the visible color, so the green,
Ah,
blue, or if you want to add an infrared to detect some diseases, or if you want to add thermal to detect, for example, if there's like an animal pest in your fields, or if there's like some stress, so like water stress from the plants. So there's like many options, and of course there's like a wide variability of sensors that you can choose. So it just
yeah.
depends. But of course, to start, you can, for 500 euros, you can use that to go to the fields. You can even use that to record weddings for friends and to use it for many other purposes. So that's it.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And then can you describe how sort of let's say, right? I have a field somewhere. I'm buying a $500 drone, and I want to start doing some things with the camera. How does that work? How do I then utilize AI, the imagery? How does that differ from what I normally do when I hop on my tractor and I go out in the fields and I use my eyes to see, and my experience to see what is happening?
Okay, so it just depends on the final purpose. So if you want to check about the general status to see, for example, the canopies from above, if we're dealing with trees, for example, or with an extensive crop like barley or maize. So the most important thing is to fly like some meters high, like I don't know, 20, 30, 40. It really depends on how big how large the field is and how much battery you have. That's the most important. And then you can, what it's called plan a mission, which is basically you draw the shape, so the polygon of the field, and then like most of the drones already come with like a path planner, like an automatic one that says
Yeah.
you are going to be flying this way. You can of course rotate it. You can change the direction if you want like parallel to the trees or perpendicular. You can choose like many of the options,
Mm.
and then when you know that this is happening, you will know how long it's going to take. If you know that, for example, your drone can have like a battery of 30 minutes, I would like normally for security, you only fly until it's like 25% battery. So you
Yeah.
know that you can fly more or less like 25 minutes. So that's like the maximum of your mission. Otherwise, it has to land. You can change batteries if you have extra, and that's it. So that's the first thing. You go to the field, you plan a mission, and you fly above. You can take pictures or you can take videos, depending on the purpose that you want. If you, for example, have trees and you want to check if there's like I don't know if there's like a lot of vegetation between rows or how big the fruit is, what you can do is just fly between the rows. So then you would have to program the mission a bit differently, or even fly manually if you are a bit like, not capable. But if you have some skills, you can do it. And then after that, there's like many options, open source, so you don't need to pay any license. Of course, the ones that are paying are a bit better, but for sure, open source ones are also fine. And you can, for example, create an orthomosaic, which is an image that has all the colors, so like the green, the red, green, and blue. You can even add the infrared if you have it in the camera. You can compute some vegetation indices to know how vigorous the plants are. You can check, for example, if there's like vegetation between the rows, so you can apply a vegetation index and then just compare with the value of the soil, so like a bare soil. And there's like many options that you can do. Of course, if you know a bit about artificial intelligence, you can just you can use the images or even the drones to do some tracking and see how, like, counting the number of fruits that you have, or you can detect how vigorous the plants are from the side, or if there's like a water stress. It really depends on how willing you are to invest time and equipment, and that's it. But of course, I most of the time use open source programs like software, and that's more than sufficient.
That is really interesting because so basically for me with my field my hypothetical field, I would send out the drone with a pre-programmed path that obviously I need to understand how that works, and then I could feed all of this into the computer and have it do some research for me that I would normally do myself. So that seems like it's a big time saver, and that probably is also one of the things. Like it sounds like it's if you do it well, that it's a productivity improvement, right, for you as a farmer.
It really is. And also it can be quite some like time consuming at the beginning, but it's also nice to get in touch with the software and knowing how much you want to do. For example, during my PhD, I developed an open source framework. So you can just introduce your images, like they're raw, as extracted from the drone, and then it gives you like I deal with vineyards and fungal grain diseases, so of course it's going to detect if there's the probability of having the fungi disease or not. And then it gives you like a heat map, so it's just like in this region it's most probable to have this disease. So then of course you can just go as a farmer to the field and visually check that, instead of having to walk all the roads and spending a lot of time. And sometimes if it has rained or something has happened, you cannot even enter in the field. So that's the moment that you have to use the drones. When it's like very large and you don't have time, or where because of any reason you cannot enter the field. That's the most important moment to use the drones. For example, now here in my region in Spain, in my fields, it has rained a lot, like too much, and we cannot even enter in the field. So what I do is just basically I fly the drones over it, and I get to know if there's any disease happening, because the moment that I will be able to enter with the tractor, I will have everything ready. So I will not lose time.
Yep. Yeah. That is, it's super interesting to see sort of how you could, because I'm thinking about it, like one of the things that I hear about a lot is how it's hard for farmers to find people that are willing to continue in their business if they're sort of older generation. And then obviously there's a problem with like price because it's expensive. Like the fields are not free. And then this could be a way that you see like, hey, yeah, I can actually run it with lower costs overall as the next generation who's maybe more savvy with the technology that you mentioned. Because yes, it's fun that it's like a PlayStation controller, but you have to be a little bit aware of these things, right? So I also think that question that I have is, so if you sort of get started this way, what would currently be like, let's say, the top of the state of the market, let's say, really the frontier of what people are doing with technology, in your knowledge, like, to your knowledge, what is like the absolute newest thing that you've seen right now?
Well, there's like in research, not
Yep.
like so much like applied to agriculture, but applied to many other fields. In research, it's very high with the hyperspectral cameras. There's like a
Yeah.
big trend using that, and also the LiDAR. So it means that we are dealing with 3D.
Yeah.
So that's really what's happening now, and also digital twins. So basically, there's like many things happening. So what would happen to my field if this, I don't know, if it would rain like 100 liters tomorrow? So you can create a
Ah,
digital twin,
yeah.
and then you can simulate that, and then
Yeah.
see what would happen in the field. With the hyperspectral cameras, you can get to know what happens in not only the infrared, not only the thermal, not only the visible, but in every different little nanometer of the whole spectrum. You can get to know
Wow.
what happens in all of that. And then with the LiDAR, so with the 3D, you can generate like 3D models of your fields. And then you can get to know, for example, how how wide the trunk of a tree is without even going to the field. You just fly in general, and that's it. It can also be applied to forestry. That's very important for forestry, for
Yeah.
like big inventories, because sometimes you cannot even reach that area because it's in the middle of nowhere. So you can just fly the drone and get to know a bit what's happening there, and with a 3D. And you can even combine 3D with color, so you can, or with infrared. So yeah,
Wow.
there's like many things happening. It's amazing. I think it's like a very good moment to get to apply all these applications to, well, all these technologies to agriculture, because of course it has already been applied to architecture, for example, or to the automobilistic sector, so like, well, the autonomous driving. But agriculture is always a bit behind, so it's very cool that it's already being applied there.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's really nice that. So if I sort of draw the parallel with other new platforms being introduced, like for example, when iPhone first came out and you had apps on your phone, it was very easy for people, relatively speaking, that were developers to build something on their own, to get started on their own building an app. Um, and I think this is the same here. Like, if you're now a farmer, like, now is the time that the technology is sort of there to easily get started, and you can sort of get used to it. It seems, from what I get from you, to sort of get into the technology things and really keep up with it, and see if you can, in a couple of years, use what is now the frontier of it and easily adapt it to your fields and your business. But getting a head start now, obviously, would be preferable, instead of waiting for that to be the mainstream, and then you're behind further than you would be if you just get started.
Exactly. Like the earliest that you get started, the earliest you get to know about the advantages, the disadvantages, what should be done, how to change things already. So maybe you can like contact the manufacturer and say, hey, can you maybe focus on that? And they can do that. So why not? So like when I was dealing with a camera that like had some specifications, but one of the things that I wanted to do was not available. Told them like, maybe consider that. Maybe I'm a weirdo and it's only me using this, but maybe it can be applied to more people, and they modified something. So why not? So yeah, I
Yeah.
think, and it's also very nice that as we're a young generation and looking forward to technology, we've been born with the phone in our hand. Why not using the phone or whatever to the fields?
Yeah, really interesting stuff. And that brings us to our Q&A section, because these are all the questions that I had. I mean, I can come up with a million more, and I'm pretty sure that we'll find the time to do more of that in a different setting. But we have some questions coming in, and the first one, that I just like you to answer, because I think it's a really fun question. Paco asks, "What do you love most about working in agriculture?" And I think this is interesting because you're young. And
Yeah.
like I said, the farmers that I know, literally a couple of guys are 80 years old,
Mhm.
a couple of women as well. They're like in their 70s. Those are the farmers that I know. What draws you to it?
Well, I have to say that my parents made me work since I'm like 5 or 10, so I have already quite some years of experience. But yeah, replying to the question, I would say that, well, the first is that you are in contact with nature. This is amazing. Like, of course, I spend a lot of time in front of the computer processing the images and getting to know what's happening. But just being able to go to the field, being in contact and with the nature and see how everything is growing, I think this is amazing. Like this feeling of being alive, like so alive that you are surrounded by it. This is amazing. And also the freedom, because you can have and the schedule that you want. So I mean, of course, not every day you can do whatever you want. Like you have to wake up at 5 or 6 a.m. to go to the field and check everything that it's working. But yeah, like if a Monday you cannot go to work, you don't go. Just go on a Tuesday. Of course, you will have to go on a Sunday. This is for sure.
There is that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know, like the freedom of being in nature and that feeling, I think that this is like the most worth feeling ever. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I love the outdoors. Clearly not a farmer. I'm in IT. But I do like the application of it to the field. Gonzalo, who I think asks, Mark, can you apply fertilizer to an orchard using drones? This is interesting. Like, so basically, you said before we've talked about analysis only, and this is really doing some of the work that you would normally do with a tractor, right? Or if you're in the US, maybe with like a chestnut plane or something like that, if it's really big. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, there's no law that prohibits fertilizer, but it does with pesticides. So
okay. Yeah.
When we are dealing with pesticides, we can really not apply from the air because it's a European directive that prohibits it. So at the moment, we cannot. But with fertilizer, yes, you just have to have a drone that can resist having a big tank, but there's quite some that can have like 40, 50 kilos.
Seriously? Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you can precisely apply the fertilizer to the plants that require it.
Oh wow, that is really cool. Yeah, because I know that in the US they use planes for like you said, for pesticides. I didn't know it wasn't allowed here.
Not in the EU, but for sure in the States they even do it with aircrafts because it's so big that they can.
Yeah.
Or even in China, in the rice fields, I've also seen some videos on it. So yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's possible because I didn't know there were drones that can carry that much weight. That's a lot of weight, 40, 50 kilograms. And because I was like, oh,
of course it's a big problem.
Yeah. Because the ones that I know can carry like, so Avi is a drone company that is based in Amsterdam that I know who make drones that are basically, they can carry 4 or 5 kilograms, I think, but they can fly far. But those are for rescue services and stuff, and for, let's say, the first responders.
Exactly.
So I was thinking about like maybe 10 kilograms of 40, 50. Then it makes sense to do it with a drone. Yeah, because you would apply. How much would you apply to an acre? Like in terms of that, how much could you supply with that?
Sorry, how much? What? Sorry.
So you have an acre, right? So you have an acre. How much fertilizer can you, like with a drone that does 40, 50 kilograms? Do you need to fly it in and out all the time? Would that make sense versus using a tractor, for example, time-wise?
In here is when precision agriculture appears. So you have to check which plant needs more and which one needs less. And then depending on how, like the maximum by law, which is like 210 kilos of nitrogen per hectare, then that's the maximum that you can apply. And it also depends on the product that you are carrying. If it's a synthetic one, you don't need like lot of volume that have that nitrogen. If you are applying slurry or manure, then for sure you will need much more volume. So we really, I cannot say like an amount of kilograms because you would need like an analysis to know the exact amount of nitrogen. Otherwise, you would go over the law, and that's really not prohibited.
Yeah. But in your
many rules in agriculture always.
Yeah, but in your assessment, it would be feasible actually, depending on some parameters, of course. But it's not an impossibility.
I would say that not with fertilizer at the moment because it's much easier to do it with the tractor, and you can it's not like an activity that spends a lot of diesel. So that's I would say that better to do it with the tractor. But the chemical, it's different because you need to apply the chemical at a very precise moment and when there's like, for example, a weed or something that needs it. So there, it's really important to use the drones, but it's not legal yet.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting indeed. Um, Yurun has a question that asks, "What inspired you to pursue a PhD on this topic?"
I think that the question would be more like, what made me go for a PhD? Because like in this
Yeah,
topic, I had it
yeah. The
clear.
topic is clear,
Yeah.
but indeed, I agree. Yeah. How come a PhD? I mean, I, I'm going to go out on a limb here. There's not that many farmers who have a PhD.
No, that's for sure not. But I mean, I was very lucky because I like my parents and my family could take over the farm while I was doing the PhD. I was
Mhm.
always helping them because you cannot be away from the reality. So that's really important. And once you are a farmer, you are a farmer forever. But I was lucky that they could take over and they could do like most of the physical activities that require it. And then because of that, I'm very curious. I said it at the beginning, the three words, and I'm eager to learn. So I really want to know more and more. And I'm very passionate about what I can do to my fields. It is like one of the things that I love the most. And I think that maybe I didn't need a PhD for that, but I think that the more knowledge that I know that I have, the more that I can improve it. And then maybe like my fields are non-irrigated, so there's like some things that I really cannot do. But this is why I wanted to do the PhD and have like more resources to experiment in some other fields, in some other countries, like with other farms. That there's like maybe some things that they don't allow me to do, but some that they do allow me to do, and that's different from my own fields. So I think that the PhD really helped me to broaden my mind and and get to know so many realities that once that I'm back to my farm now, I have too much no not too much, but I have like too many possibilities. I
Yeah.
can apply a lot of things. So yeah, and of course all the things that the PhD helps you do. So I now I learn like I read a lot of scientific articles. So what, like for example, I produce barley. So how is barley produced in the States? How is it produced in the Netherlands? And what is
Mm.
similar to my own field? So it makes you be like much more curious and much more realistic.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I also think that combining these two seemingly very distant fields of agriculture and technology, to put it like that, and specifically doing research into those combinations, but combining fields like that is really interesting. It's sort of reminds me of how Steve Jobs said that it's like sort of the crossroads between technology and art, what they tried to achieve with the first Apple things, and it's the same here. It's a really interesting intersection where indeed we also get a lot more knowledge these days in research from what I hear and read with regards to let's say the physiological processes in plants and animals, and so that opens up new possibilities in I assume also in precision agriculture. And then
Totally.
also with the technology on that end becoming more like LiDAR and things that you say, there seems to be sort of it feels like it would be an exponential growing field in terms of applications that you can do. So yeah, it seems like you're in really a good position for that with your skill set.
Yeah, we'll see how
Yeah,
it goes in 10 years time, but yeah.
true, true. Miriam asks, "What trends in agricultural automation excite you the most?" Yeah, so we've passed many of them. Which ones are you? Are you very excited about? Obviously, you research drones, but
Mm, I think that everything that applies to tractors, because I really like heavy machinery, so tractors are
yeah,
amazing for me. So everything that applies to tractors, I think that is super cool because it's what is easier also for the farmer to uptake because it's what they are most used to it. So I
mhm,
think that this is like the one that for me it's the most exciting one. Whatever, for example, having the GPS and knowing where exactly you are, what the things that you have done, and what needs to be done. Also, that you can like be in the tractor just like this, and then when it finishes the row, it just like beeps a little bit to know like, hey, you are in the at the end of the row. Just go up the tractor again, or whatever you were doing. Just be like pay some attention. So I think that a lot of things that are very basic, but for me already that it's quite nice.
yeah, that's really. I agree with it being a very easy way into the market because it's always these things have to sort of be applied to things that you're already used to have the best, let's say, adoption rate.
Exactly.
I would say, yeah. Interesting to see that you can apply these things to tracks, and such a simple thing as GPS can get you so much data and so much information,
Yes.
right?
GPS is amazing. Like
Yeah.
all the things that can be done at the moment is insane. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we have time for one more question, and I think this one's nice. What are the biggest obstacles for precision agriculture becoming the norm? Assuming it's not the norm already, but I think it's not.
No, it's not.
By far.
I would say that it always has to go with how willing you are to apply them. So it shouldn't be imposed. And then like the latest rules, so like the European rules are tending to go in that direction. Of course, it's easier because you can be like more eco-friendly and you can be like produce like with much more precision, but you have to want to do that. And this is really important because sometimes when you're a farmer, you own a field and you feel that everything is being imposed. So like what you can do, what you cannot do, and the way you have to do it. So as long as the people is willing to do it, like they should have all the help, like all the assistance that is needed to pursue that. But if you are really not going for that, for example, my grandparents who are like 70 something, 80 years old, they of course cannot, like, well, they don't want to, but they cannot. So they should be really like outside of that imposition. So the biggest obstacle would be like in general the laws. So if you are willing to apply it, go for it, all the help. Otherwise, yeah. Also, if you are young, of course, it's not the same. Like if you are dealing with a young generation, you can not push them, but like a little bit. So like getting to make them see all the benefits that it has. And of course, if all the neighbors are doing it and they see that there's like a big improvement, they will for sure go for it. But never impose, because that's it. You sometimes feel that you are not the owner of your field anymore.
Yeah. The carrot and the stick, basically. Yeah, that's a really good point in terms of not imposing things, and instead trying to find ways that motivate people to research these things as well. Because from what you've told us today, I feel that it's a very dynamic field. There's a lot of change happening today, but also coming up, as you said, with all these new technologies. Very exciting. So thank you for sharing this with us today. I had a blast. For everyone that tuned in and asked questions, thank you, and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for the opportunity. Bye.